Welcome dear students to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. K.S. Nagaraja of Deccan College, Pune, teaching the course of Historical Linguistics. In this module, we look at the phonetic laws and chain shifts. Already in the previous modules, we found that how sounds change in languages, how sound change could be regular as well. So this module looks at some of the best known sound regularities, normally known as laws, propounded in the 19th century while studying Indo-European languages, namely Grimm's law, Verner's law, and Grassmann's law. And also, followed by that, we will take a look at the nature of chain shifts found in languages. That means various changes which occur more in a chain action rather than in isolated action. So these things we study in this particular module. An amazingly regular correspondence between the obstruent systems of Germanic and the other Indo-European languages caught the imagination of linguists in the early part of the 19th century. It inspired a great amount of research which slowly removed apparent exceptions to the changes that were responsible for this correspondence. The findings of that research, in turn, eventually provided some of the most important empirical support for the regularity hypothesis. As explained in the lecture on characteristic features of sound change, the most important characteristic of sound change are regularity and irreversibility. They claim that sound changes are very different from other language changes in that they operate mechanically and regularly without any exceptions. That is, sound changes can only be conditioned by phonetic factors and not by grammatical, lexical, or semantic factors. The postulation of this hypothesis concerning the nature of sound change completely revolutionized the study of diachronic aspects of language. It made that study highly systematic. Though there were severe criticisms of this hypothesis, but two important generalizations that form the basis of the hypothesis appear to have stood the test of time. They are the regularity of sound change and the irreversibility of sound change, as in fact stated earlier. Sound changes are considered to be regular in that they affect the whole paradigm of the sounds involved. As such, they can only be conditioned by phonetic factors. That is, sound changes directly affect sounds and not individual words. They affect words only indirectly because of the fact that the sounds that changed had occurred in those words. In finding regular sound changes, various scholars worked and succeeded in identifying regularities. Among the famous scholars, Jakob Grimm, Carl Verner, Grassmann, and their laws known as Grimm's law, Verner's law, and Grassmann's law will be studied in this lecture. They are major milestones in the history of Indo-European linguistics and thus also of historical linguistics. And traditionally, all linguists have had to learn these laws. 1. Grimm's law. Grimm's law is an extremely important set of sound changes in historical linguistics. It is intimately involved in the history of the comparison, in fact comparative method, and the regularity hypothesis. Grimm's law, first worked out in 1822, shows the regular way in which the Germanic sound system diverged from that of Indo-European. It involves 9 sets of correspondences covering three interrelated changes in the series of plosives from Proto-Indo-European to Proto-Germanic. So one set voiceless stops changes to voiceless fricatives. Two, voice stops changing to voiceless stops. Three, voiced aspirated stops, sometimes called murmur stops, changing to plain voice stops. The same may be shown in the rule frame as follows. First, plus stop minus voice changing to plus fricative, plus stop plus voice changing to minus voice, plus stop plus aspiration changing to plus voice minus aspiration plus or minus fricatives. The notation plus or minus fricative indicates that the outcome allophonically appears also as a fricative. The table is given. Grimm's law can be interpreted as either a pull chain or a push chain, where the, and the represent all the stops of these series. If the temporal sequence were 1. The changing to fricative the, 2. The changing to the, 3. Aspirated the changing to unaspirated the, then it would be assumed that 1. The changing to fricative the took place first, leaving the language with the three series voiceless fricatives fa, tha, ha, voice stops the, ba, the, ga, and voice aspirates bha, the, gha, but no plain voiceless stops, that means no pa, tha, ka. This would be an unnatural situation which would pull in the voice stops to fill the gap. So the changing to the series. However, this would leave the language with voice aspirates but no plain voice stops, also an unnatural arrangement, and so the voice aspirates would be pulled in to fill the slot of the plain voice stops. So the becoming the, etc., making a more symmetrical system. In the push chain scenario, the voice aspirates first started to move towards the plain voice stops, a natural change towards easier pronunciation or easier articulation. So, but the approach of the into the space of the forced original the to move towards the, which in turn pushed original the out in order to maintain a distinction between these series of sounds. Another set of cognates reflecting Grimm's law is given below. Here, the Gothic and English forms show the results of these changes in Germanic, while the Sanskrit, Greek, and Latin forms for the most part reflect the Indo-European stops unchanged, that is, they did not undergo Grimm's law as the Germanic. Jacob Grimm was most successful in bringing them into the attention of the linguistic community. Interestingly, actually, they were discovered before him by a Danish scholar, Rasmus Rask. So now we look at the second law called Verner's law. A set of what earlier had seemed to be exceptions to Grimm's law is explained by Verner's law. He found out that Grimm's law worked well whenever the stress fell on the root syllable of the Sanskrit word, but when it fell on another syllable, the consonants behaved differently. Voiceless plosives then did not stay as voiceless fricatives, but became voiced plosives. It is illustrated below. So the chart may be read. And another set of illustration provided in the grammatical alternations. It is easy to see why Verner's law was also often called grammatical alternation. The accent in Proto-Indo-European fell on different syllables in certain grammatically related forms, as seen in the forms compared in the above table. As a result, Germanic languages have different allomorphs and grammatical paradigms which depend upon whether or not Verner's law applied and its correlation with the place of the accent in the proto-language. Just as expected by Grimm's law, the Old English forms in the first two columns have th, where the accent in Proto-Indo-European preceded the original th, as illustrated by Sanskrit forms. However, in the last two forms, Old English does not have the th as expected by Grimm's law, but has the of Verner's law, because the accent fell after this medial th in Proto-Indo-European, again as shown by the Sanskrit forms. So the Old High German forms subsequently underwent other sound changes of their own, but the difference between those with the and those with the has its origin in Verner's law, just as the alternations seen in the Old English cognates. The allomorphic variation which resulted, as seen in alternations seen in the Old English cognates. The allomorphic variation which resulted, as in the verb paradigm in the above table, illustrates the grammatical alternation that comes from Verner's law. So, the instances of Verner's law cases above, which originally appear to be exceptions to Grimm's law, turn out also to be explained by regular sound change by Verner's law, a condition change having to do with the earlier location of the accent. That is, if Grimm's law is regular, so is Verner's law. However, the conditions in each case is different. It is therefore often said that exception proves the law. Now, the third law, that is called the Grassmann's law. Another set of forms which earlier had seemed to be exceptions to Grimm's law is explained by Grassmann's law. Greek and Sanskrit regularly dissimulated the first two aspirated stops within a word so that the first lost its aspiration. These are voice aspirate stops in Sanskrit and voiceless aspirate stops in Greek. This regularity was discovered by Grassmann, and so it is called Grassmann's law. Proto-Indo-European dhi, they, me, I put or place with reduplication of root they, to Sanskrit da, dha, me, and Greek ti, the, me. As a result of Grassmann's law, some sound correspondences between Sanskrit, Greek, and Germanic languages do not match the expectations from Grimm's law, as for example in the following cognates. Sanskrit bha-bhuva becomes ba-bhuva, became reduplication of root bhu. Greek pe-phu-ka, changing to pe-phu-ka, converted, reduplication of phu to engender. Some more examples from Greek can be given. Trichos, hair, genitive singular. Trix, nominative singular. Trepo, I rear, nourish, cause to grow. Threps, oh, I will rear. Threcho, I walk. Threcho, so, I will walk. So we may put it in a formula. Plus stop changes to minus aspirate before a sound which is plus aspirate, that is according to Grimm's law. So the examples, Proto-Indo-European, where both the syllables, first two syllables are aspirated. In Sanskrit, the first syllable loses its aspiration. Budhyate, bubodha, bhotsyati, bhut. So these are the forms we obtain. One illustrates Grassmann's law and two provides examples for the same. As the examples in 2b show, Grassmann's law can apply to more than one segment per word. In effect, it eliminates all but the rightmost aspirate in a given word. Moreover, she suggests that Grassmann's law led by another change, the de-aspirated and de-voice stops before sa. This change is formulated in 3 below. Plus stop becomes minus aspirate, minus voice before minus de-aspiration. So now we move on to next topic, which is called the chain shift. In fact, it is more a continuation of the regular sound changes, which naturally leads to chain shifts. Sometimes several sound changes seem to be interrelated with more far-reaching impact on the overall phonological system of the language. These changes do not happen in isolation from one another, but appear to be connected, dependent upon one another in some way. Such interconnected changes are called chain shifts. Several reasons have been put forward why chain shifts should occur. It has often been attributed to notions such as symmetry in phonemic inventories, naturalness or markedness, maximum differentiation, and a tendency for holes in phonological patterns to be filled. It is believed that the sound surface sound system are integrated into a whole whose parts are so interconnected that a change in any one of the system can have implication for other parts of the system. The general idea behind the chain shift is that sound systems tend to be symmetrical or natural, and those that are not, that is, those which have a gap in the inventory, tend to change to make them symmetrical or natural. That means they try to fill the gap. However, a change which fills one gap may create other gaps elsewhere in the system, which then precipitate other changes towards symmetry or naturalness to rectify its effects, thus setting off a chain reaction. Chain shifts are classified into two types: pull chains, are also known as drag chains, and push chains. In a pull chain, one change may create a hole in the phonemic pattern, that means create a gap or an asymmetry, which is followed by another change which fills the hole, that particular gap, by pulling some sound from somewhere else in the system and changing that sound to fit the needs of symmetry or naturalness so that it fills the gap. And if the sound which shifted to fill the original hole in the pattern leaves a new hole elsewhere in the pattern, then some other change may pull some other sound into fill that gap. Behind a push chain is the notion that languages or their speakers want to maintain differences between sounds in the system in order to facilitate understanding. If a sound starts changing by moving into the articulated space of another sound, in the push chain view, this can precipitate a change where the sound moves away from the encroaching one in order to maintain distinction important for meaning. If the fleeing sound is pushed towards the articulated space of some other sound, then it too may shift to avoid the encroachment, thus setting off a chain reaction called a push chain. Sometimes the notion of maximum differentiation is called upon in these instances. The idea behind maximum differentiation is that the sounds in a sound system tend to be distributed so as to allow as much perception difference between them as the articulated space can provide. Thus, if a language has only 3 vowels, we expect them to be spread out, with E high front unrounded, U high back rounded, and A low central or back unrounded. We do not expect them to be bunched up. For example, all in the high front series. And these intuitions are confirmed by the languages of the world where most of the 3 vowel systems have E, U, A or E, O, A. If a language has 4 stops, we do not expect them to be bunched at one point of articulation, say all labials, pa, ba, pa, bha, etc., with none at all in other points of articulation. Rather, we expect them to be spread across alveolar, velar, and perhaps other points of articulation as well. Here, we can look at some clear illustrations for the chain shifts. Classical Latin has 3 series of stops intervocalically. The geminates pa, pa, ta, ka, the single voiceless stops pa, ta, ka, and the voice badaga. These 3 original series of stops changed from Latin to Spanish in an interrelated fashion. Geminate stops became single voiceless stops. Plain voiceless stops became voice stops. So, pataka became badaga. Examples are given. Third, voice stops except ba, which remained, were lost. So, da and ga became 0. So, the examples are provided here. The series of changes in the stops in the development from Latin to Spanish has been interpreted as a push chain. Let we start with geminated. The, and the represent all the stops in the 3 respective series having taken place in the order. Geminated becomes ungeminated. Ta becomes the, da becomes 0. Second possibility, as the geminates began to simplify, becoming single, this put pressure on the plain voiceless series to get out of the way. So, ta becoming the, which in turn put pressure on the voice series, causing it to be lost except for ba. So, da becomes 0. It would also be possible to interpret this series of changes as a pull chain, applying in the temporal sequence, da becoming 0, ta becoming the, ta becoming the. In this possible scenario, the loss of the voice stops, da becoming 0, left a gap in the inventory, which was filled by the shift of the plain voiceless stops to voiced, so ta becoming the, which then left a gap for the voiceless stops, that is, a language with voiceless geminates but no plain voiceless stops, which would be unexpected. So the becoming the. Between 1 and 3 sequences, the latter alone must be true. If we consider the first possibility, the outcome of the change, that is, the geminate becoming the, would also be included as input of the second change, which would then become 0, leaving no series in the language. In the second case, there will be the and the left in the system after the change as well. Now we move to another interesting topic, the English great vowel shift, or great vowel shift in English. This is one of the best known of all the chain shifts between Chaucer around 1400 and Shakespeare, born in 1564. English underwent a series of interrelated vowel changes known as the Great Vowel Shift, in which long vowels systematically raised and the highest long vowels diphthongized, as seen in the following table. The part of this complex development is the Middle English changing to 16th century transition. It is clear from the values mentioned above that what happened overall was this, as can be illustrated from B below. That is, this shows that the lower vowels move higher up and the high vowels are pushed further and they become diphthongized and the change takes place. That means non-low long vowels rise one height. In fact, it is assumed that low vowel does not take part in this kind of change. So the high vowels diphthongize. This can be seen as a chain, a series of changes, each of which is some way entails the next. Assuming the propriety of describing the above in this way, there are two possible chain interpretations. One, that the high vowels diphthongize, leaving empty slots, and the half-closed ones move up into the vacated positions, leaving slots behind them, which the half-open ones move up to fill, as can be shown here. The possibilities are shown here, all the 4 possibilities. So this is a drag chain. Alternatively, retaining the chain metaphor, we could have the movement begin from below, each vowel pushing the next one up, out of place. The high vowels having no higher height to rise to become diphthongized. This is the push chain and can be visualized by reading B from E to up. Here there are no empty slots but an uniform chain progression, each rising entailing the one above. Of course, otherwise one vowel would emerge with the next higher. In this interpretation, it is possible to give alternative arguments. So students are advised to read the references provided, and also, of course, they can get from the internet lots of materials in this aspect. Thank you.